Hi there, and welcome to another installment of What the F is Going On. And this one is one of those where you think, but why? Why the what? Because apparently the EU is now at war with the US. Trade war, mind you, but still it's a conflict between the US and the EU, and you have to wonder, why would allies as close as the Europeans and the Americans be at conflict with one another? Well, the reason is that Donald Trump likes simple words because he is, well, after all, a simple man. And he loves the word tariffs. Someone should by now explain to him that a tariff is not something foreigners pay to the Americans, but it's something paid by Americans to the American state because it's an import duty. When you import something that's under tariff, you have to pay a percentage of the value of that good to the American state, and the importer, well, is going to be American, and he will of course pass that cost on to consumers, which makes the product more expensive. The idea is then that the product is now more expensive from importers, so domestic producers will have a price advantage. That, of course, requires the domestic producers to exist, and if they exist, to be able to produce enough to fulfill the entire market need. And that's quite unlikely in a lot of cases. But Trump just carries on with this and thinks that the Europeans in this case, well, basically everyone in the world in this case, are going to pay a lot of money to the US Treasury. But yeah, again, we know that's not how things work. And this time, Donald Trump has imposed a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminium imports to the US. So that would be imports from Canada, from China, from the EU, because the US uses a lot of steel and aluminium everywhere in their industry. So, well, and for building and stuff like that. So they import a lot. They do produce some themselves, but they import a lot. And Canada responded in kind, but they suspended their response a bit because the Americans called them up and asked, could we please chat? That's not the way it's being presented in the media, but that's what happened. So they postponed the response until I think today. I think they're going to have that little chat today, and then the Canadians will decide what they want to do. But the EU hasn't taken this lying down either. It's a fairly huge market we're talking about. Aluminium and steel imports, the EU expects to lose around $200 billion or euros worth of money from this. So they responded by placing $200 billion worth of tariffs on American products. And they haven't singled out just one area because, well, I don't know which area that would be, but they've decided to spread it out a lot. Right now, the list of tariffed products is about 90 pages long with individual listings of products or product groups. For instance, they've placed a 50% tariff on American whiskey. You'd think whiskey, that's not a huge thing. No, it isn't, but it's huge enough market, and it has an interesting attribute. It has all of the items on this list. There exist easily available alternatives that are not American. The EU produces a lot of whiskey itself, and you can import from Japan and from other countries that produce whiskey. So EU consumers are not going to feel any discomfort in this. Their prices won't increase as long as they decide not to buy American products, which they likely will when they increase by 50%. Yeah. The sanctions in the EU are chosen to not hurt their own consumers, but at the same time cause maximum economic pain in the US. And we have previous examples of this because last time Donald Trump was in power, he initiated another trade war. A lot smaller, it was only $2.8 billion worth. But the EU responded by placing tariffs on American orange juice. And there are easily accessible alternatives to American orange juice from Brazil and from a lot of other countries. And some of the producers in the EU that imported this American orange juice, well, they switched to other producers, other sources of orange juice. And when the tariffs were removed under Joe Biden, they had some negotiations and tariffs were removed. Well, a lot of the EU importers didn't switch back to American orange juice because now they had supplies from elsewhere. So this market was permanently lost. Not all of it, but a lot of it was permanently lost for American producers. So there was immediate pain and there was long-term pain. And well, this entire list is designed to work that way. The American companies won't lose all of the market, but they will most definitely lose a lot of it. And some of the products are even more deviously selected, because one of the products is soybeans. The US produces a lot of soybeans from all over, but the majority is apparently grown in Louisiana, of all places. But why would you want to hurt Louisiana? Well, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is elected there. He is one of the people who, on paper, has the power to do something about this. He should be able to influence the president because, well, the president is dependent on his majority in the House of Representatives, which is controlled by Mike Johnson. So Mike Johnson should be able to persuade Trump to change his mind and stuff like this, but he's done nothing of the kind. So his constituents are now going to feel a lot of financial pain. Targeted and likely to a large degree permanent, because again, as with all the other products on this list, there are alternatives. Once again, Brazil pops up. They produce a lot of soybeans as well and have absolutely no interest in entering into a trade war with the EU. So yeah, this is going to be fun. Donald Trump could, of course, drop these tariffs at any point in time, but it seems that he does need to feel the pain before he reacts, and he doesn't remember what happened last time, although he had to shell out massive amounts of cash in support of American farmers who would go bankrupt if they weren't able to sell their soybeans to the EU. So I don't know exactly what he expected to happen this time, because, well, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same stuff and expecting different results. So yeah, it does say something about Donald Trump, it seems. Anyways, that is where it's going. It's not going to hit the US right now. The EU has been fairly nice and friendly and said that their measures will come into force on the 1st of April. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting April's Fools, but that's not going to be a joke. So until then, Trump and the Americans can back out and all this will just go away. Or they can do what they threatened to do with Canada. That means increase other tariffs again, because the Canadians dared to, well, tariff them back. And that's where you get into trade war, where you get tariffs on top of tariffs on top of, yeah, you can see that. And well, for now, it's been postponed in the US-Canada conflict here, but yeah, the time is running out, and the EU tariffs also closing in. So we'll see how this heads out. And speaking of financial pain, it's going to be an interesting time in the US shortly, because for everything in the public sector to work, you need money, of course, which is distributed by the government, by the, well, the legislative branch is what I'm trying to say. That would be the House of Representatives, followed by the Senate. They need to pass a budget for there to be any money to work with, and they've had a bit of trouble with that. But recently they passed the budget through the House of Representatives, which is clearly controlled by the Republicans, who also control the Senate, by the way, which now have to approve this budget. But the Senate has this weird rule, it's called a filibuster, where the minority can block something that would ordinarily be voted through with, well, an ordinary vote, more than 50% of the votes, and it's through, that's it. And Republicans have 50% of the vote, and to avoid things getting stuck, they also have the tiebreaker by the vice president. But when you invoke this rule to block things, this filibuster, that means that you then require 60% of the votes to break the filibuster before you can then pass the law or whatever it is with the 50% of the vote plus the tiebreaker. And the Republicans do not control 60% of the votes in the Senate. They have exactly 50% and then the tiebreaker. So this is going to be interesting. Are the Democrats going to help the Republicans pass this budget, which has slashed a lot of things that the American public rely on? Huge parts of the American public rely on a lot of these services, and they are hallmarks of the Democratic Party. They want these things to work, and they're being slashed down this budget. Are they going to help pass this budget? Seems quite unlikely. And without the budget, everything in the US shuts down. Again, financial pain, because that sends shockwave through everything. And a lot of stuff stops working. Think the military is exempt from this. They will have money and they will keep working anyway, but a lot of other stuff is just going to stop. Park rangers, for once, and they've been fired, of course, now, but a lot of other stuff will stop unless they find a budget deal that can pass through both House of Representatives and the Senate. Yeah, it does seem that the Americans like pain, the financial kind at least, but we'll see how all this spins out. I'll be back pretty soon because there are a lot of other developments. This entire peace deal about Ukraine, Russia thing, which is weird, but we'll get back to that in another episode. I'll see you then.